Hello, my name is Zach Smith, and I will be presenting on tackling the topic of contact sports. Is the risk worth the reward? Imagine you're at the end of your senior year or at the end of anything. Maybe you're moving from the house that you've lived in your whole life. It can be a little bittersweet, right? You may be excited for a new thing, but you feel like there will always be a piece of you left in that old house, for example. Football has the same effect. The memories that you get from the football field will most likely never leave you. Did you know that approximately 79% of adults who generally follow sports say that they follow football? Additionally, 41% even say that it is their favorite sport. Football, professional football, has been around since 1920. In fact, in 1972, it passed baseball as America's favorite sport. Many professional football players struggle with brain damage after retirement. Approximately 33% of them, or one third, believe they have CTE or some form of CTE. CTE is a brain disorder caused by repeated head injuries. And the only way to definitively diagnose whether a person has CTE is after death during an autopsy of the brain. So at the moment, there is no way to be for sure whether a living person has or does not have CTE. There have been many efforts to make football safer, such as changing where and how they can hit, changing kickoff rules for the pros. And additionally, the helmet has evolved much over the time. At first, it was just a leather cap, and now it is a very highly scientific thing that has AC units even, or a speaker so that the quarterback can get play calls from the coach. A study was done that found 111,000 injuries occurred from youth aged 5 to 14, and they're compared to 93,000 and 15 to 24-year-olds in 2021. In car crashes, there were about 31,000 injuries, and 3,700 of those were fatal. Colorado researchers estimated that only about 10% of the football injuries required surgery, though. So most of that was like a small finger prick or something like that. Contact sports should not be banned before high school because contact sports are hard, and hard things are good for youth to go through in order to experience growth. Team sports are also a great way to learn respect, teamwork, discipline, and many others. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, the participants learn to assess the risk for themselves and for those around them, such as their teammates. Hard things are good for teenagers to go through in order to experience growth. James 1:2 says, we should count it all joy when we face trials of various kinds. Tom Brady, in his Hall of Fame induction speech, encourages youth to do football for the simple reason that it is hard. It's hard when you get up at 6 a.m. in the morning to go train and work out, and all your friends are sleeping in and eating pancakes. It's hard when you can't go to the beach or the pool because you're weighed down with all your gear going to practice and it's 90 degrees outside, although in Texas, often much hotter. Tom Brady, who has played in the NFL for 23 years and has won 7 Super Bowl championships, probably has a pretty good grasp at what football has to offer and the benefits that come along with it. Tom Brady encourages you to take part in contact sports because although everyone experiences bumps, bruises, and suffering, life goes on and life doesn't stop because you hurt your knee. Romans 5:3-5 says, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character. Character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Football teaches young men about facing adversity because no matter what people tell you, you're going to face adversity at multiple points throughout your life. Adversity is a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. An excellent example of going through adversity, on the football field especially, is Damar Hamlin. On January 2nd, 2023, he was performing a routine tackle on T. Higgins, wide receiver for the Bengals. And after doing that, he stood up, and shortly after, he fainted. He had suffered a heart attack. And although he was all but dead on the field, shortly after, on September 8th, 2024, he returned to the field of play and is now continuing to play the game that he loves, football. This is an excellent example of adversity because although he was all but dead on the field, he fought through the adversity that was put in his way and he managed to come back to football. Proverbs 24:10 says, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." The hope is, when we face adversity, which we will, not to faint, but to push past the limits and to push yourself and to go through the adversity. People should also have growth mindsets when in the face of adversity. Having a growth mindset helps to develop abilities and intelligence through effort, perseverance, and learning. Having a growth mindset also creates a love of learning that is significant, that is beneficial for significant accomplishments. Having a fixed mindset, which is the opposite of a growth mindset, says that no matter how hard you believe in your ability to do something or how hard you work and train at it, you won't be able to do it, such as jumping off a cliff. No matter how hard humans believe in their ability to fly, they won't be able to fly on their own power. And no amount of willpower or working at it or practice will enable them to fly. Contact sports, especially football, are beneficial because they enable the players to work together as a team. In contact sports, the synergy and collective effort of the whole team often determines the outcome, making teamwork not just beneficial, but necessary. Young people will need this as adults because in the workplace, they're going to have to work with their coworkers. No matter how much you love or hate them, you're going to have to work with them. And football lays out that very well because not all of your teammates are going to be your best friends. As a matter of fact, you may not like some of them, but that doesn't matter because you have to still practice and play games with them, assuming you want to win. Adults who did contact sports as kids also will be less likely or will be more likely to share the blame and success and will be less likely to try to do everything themselves. Because in football, you're taught to rely on your teammates and they're taught to rely on you. Contact sports also help with handling high pressure situations. Those who take part in team sports learn to work well with others. As I've said before, you have to work with your teammates to win. It's not a one person game. One person isn't going to win the game for you or lose it for you. And team sports, especially football, do an excellent job of that. In football, the participants are forced to think of how their actions directly influence and affect those around them. Any action can have severe consequences. If you make a mistake on your blocking assignment, for example, your teammate could get injured or at least sustain a very hard tackle. And so football teaches the athletes and the teammates to rely on each other for protection and to win the game. Contact sports are also beneficial because they can provide an emotional outlet. It can lower stress, anxiety, and depression while also increasing health, concentration, confidence, and self-esteem. Another lesson learned from football is how to deal with and handle setbacks, which will happen, and it forces the players to maintain focus throughout the game or practice. Whenever a tough day arises at school or at home, hitting the pads almost always helps to relieve or at least ease some, if not all, of that stress. From time to time, you're going to have tough days at school or at home. That's just a part of life. But when you get on the football field, you can release that pent up emotion in a socially acceptable way, such as hitting the pads or tackling your teammates. Contact sports can provide a healthy and controlled outlet for the anger and frustration that you may experience during home life or if you fail a test. Contact sports are also beneficial because they can improve physical fitness. Participation in sports can help youth become stronger and more aerobically fit and less likely to develop heart conditions. Athletes are constantly moving, blocking, and tackling and resisting their opponents throughout practice or the games. The workouts that you get on the football field are very different from the workouts that you get in the gym, for example, because the workouts in the gym typically are designed to work one, maybe two muscle groups, whereas the workouts that you get in football, you're using all of your muscles to, as I said before, move, block, resist, and tackle your opponents. So I would argue that the workouts that you get from football field are significantly better because they don't only work one or two muscle groups, but they work your whole body. Contact sports teach those who participate in them how to assess risk not only for themselves, but for those around them, their teammates. Without going through risky behaviors as children, it is actually less likely that you will want to go into a profession that is more risky, such as a police officer, a firefighter, anything like that, first responders. And a study was done that found brain injury experts and neurosurgical department chairs are actually 16 times more likely to have participated in contact sports growing up. And they are also 1.5 times as likely to have sustained a concussion. Therefore, if you don't experience those risky behaviors or tendencies as children, then there will be less of an interest to go into risky professions, which we need very much as adults. Athletes learn to assess risk for their teammates as well as themselves. In Raising Boys by Design, Gregory L. Jentz says that testosterone is a risk-taking and aggression chemical. And it seems that it is clear that it is part of God's divine design for our young men. 3 out of 4 households with both parents present, the male is actually the risk taker or the risk encourager. This is an excellent example that men are typically more prone to risk taking or risk encouraging behaviors. And that's not necessarily bad. God clearly had a purpose when he designed our men that way. Children, but especially boys, are more impulsive and more likely to take risks. Risks and challenges are important for healthy sensory and motor development. Kids need to be able to do risky things growing up, such as jumping off a swing set, because without doing risky things, if you do risky things, your healthy sensory and motor development will increase. Bruce McLaughlin, a principal at Swanson Elementary School in New Zealand, removed all rules from recess. He wanted to see what would happen if he did, and the results were stunning. There was actually a decrease in the amount of bullying in the classroom and an increased participation in class. The children were allowed to jump off swing sets, jump off playgrounds, climb trees, build with construction materials. And there were actually a lot more benefits than negative things that came from it. Maybe Mr. Fester should try to do something like this just to see what would happen. A lot of people will say that there is a serious problem of brain damage that will come from participating in tackle football. Concussion Legacy Foundation did a study where they found that the link between football and concussions may be stronger than the link between smoking and lung cancer. Now, although this may be discouraging for anybody wondering whether or not they want to participate in football, there wasn't a definitive result, so we don't know if it actually is. And also, smoking doesn't offer very many, if any, benefits, whereas football promotes unity, teamwork, discipline, self-respect, and many others. Contact sports are very dangerous. Football players sustain about 340 impacts during the season. But driving is also very dangerous. And driving, there were about 560,000 collisions over the year. and that totals to about 1,500 per day. And yet, a lot of people want to ban tackle football, and they hardly bat an eye to drag or other risky things. Children's bodies are still developing, they will say, but arguably more importantly, so are their brains. We can only lose brain cells after birth, so there's no way to regenerate them or repair them. When children are young, it is easier for them to learn a new language or learn math better or grammar because of their brain plasticity. This allows the children's brains to be easier molded or shaped. That's why when you're young, it's a lot easier for you to learn new things. As the common saying goes, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Therefore, we shouldn't let contact sports be banned before high school because they show hard things are good for us. They show us how to work as a team, improve physical fitness, and provide an emotional outlet. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, they teach us how to assess risk. It is clear that after looking at all of these benefits, it would be very hard for me to agree to remove this privilege and opportunity from our young men. Wives and daughters, don't you want your husbands to learn how to be soft and gentle with you, and yet also learn when it's time to flip the switch and be protecting and be the man of the house when the time calls for it, as Ecclesiastes 3 demonstrates? Young men, when they're growing up, need to be moving, hitting, and interacting with their surroundings. Thank you.